What's up, Maggie? How's it going?
Hey, how is that, everyone? You specifically. Hi.
Right? Yeah. Thanks for coming on the show today. And
Yeah,
before we jumped on, I was mentioning something about Avatar, and it's something that's been in the news lately. And I'm just gonna read quickly the little passage that I saw, and then maybe we could talk about it.
sure.
The Associated Press reported last week on how hundreds of people have responded to what they see as racist themes in Avatar. Obviously, it's a 3 point something billion-dollar franchise now, right? So, accusing the film of being everything from a fantasy about race told from the point of view of white people to the white messiah fable. Obviously there are some elements of indigenous people. One of the big arguments is they're taking a language from the indigenous people and altering it slightly, I believe, and using that. And I'm sure you've seen the film, but for the audience, real quick, there's a white Marine from the U.S. of A states, and he's a cripple. Well, he can't use his legs, and he gets the ability to become an avatar within this race of people from a different planet, and by doing so, he helps them fight back against the oppression of the Marines. And in doing so, though, that is the white messiah fable. Have you seen Avatar? Do you feel that way about the film?
So I'm about to out myself as one of the only people on the planet that has never seen Avatar. I've never seen anything to do with Avatar. I know the people are blue. I understand a little of these issues, but not enough to probably go into depth on them. However, that being said, I think this is an interesting situation that's happened with this film, with other films. Um, we're in a very strange spot in our history with these things, so
Mhm.
we can speak directly to the problems we're seeing in front of us very quickly now with the internet, in a way that brings up larger discussions amongst a much wider group of people. And so you're getting a very wide breadth of what people think of other people's art very
Yeah.
quickly. And for me, I think we as a people have to, there's two things. The more we diversify the writers, the more these issues won't really be issues.
Yeah.
Avatar was a while ago. So if there was an issue, and that's my thing, and I do understand why we're rehashing everything, but Avatar itself had an impact on a lot of people.
Yeah.
And now I wonder, going back, if when looking at it, they might too see problematic areas that didn't work so well now. Um, that's one of the hard things about returning to art. A lot of the great classics of the 70s, the classics of the 80s, classics of the 90s are very offensive by modern terms. And they
Yeah.
have there's some very bad themes. And censorship in America is a strange relationship. And art and censorship is a strange relationship. But then there's offensive things that are actually offensive. So
Yeah.
it's a very difficult conversation, I think, for an artist to get in, because as an artist, my stance is going to be, if I was to write into subject areas such as they have tried to tackle, I just don't think I would have written the way that they would have written. So it's hard for me to even make that call on what these other artists did. Um, I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm walking in a circle, but that's always my circle with that. It's a little bit that integrity of artist, but also we have real issues. And unfortunately, in the case of Avatar, I don't know what the actual issues are. I don't know if they're right or wrong. I don't have any opinion about whether this is or isn't, because I've really not paid any attention to it.
Yeah, you bring up a better point though, which is the reason Avatar was even brought up is, you know, art does change over the years. What art was
It
at
does.
one point, I mentioned this very quickly before we started recording, was, art has always been policed in one way or another, from the FCC to even in the Renaissance time. You couldn't draw certain things because it was satanic, and and I feel art needs to be an element to challenge society. Do I believe that we should disrespect society? No, I agree with you on that. There are certain things that are offensive for good reason, and then there are things that we are personally offended by, which is basically, it's our perspective. It's, obviously, if I tell a fart joke, someone might be extremely offended, whereas somebody might laugh, but it's
But
not offensive.
But you're right. You're right. I think also, though, too, the other thing, and this is the bigger issue, is that, if artists, if comedians specifically, writers specifically, that storytellers specifically, if you're going to tell a story and it's going to be brave, and whatever that means for you, and you tell that story in the bravest way you know how, and you yourself intentionally go into it with that attitude that I'm going to tell this brave story, and the people around you see something wrong or have a critical eye or specifically say something in the way that it was produced. And remember, there's so many people on the way from the beginning to the end. But let's imagine the final product is offensive in some way.
Yeah.
That's also part of the art.
Agreed.
And but I also respect the fact that we have this culture that has ignored the voices of a lot of people for a long time in the pursuit of money. And I think that really possibly, because it's so many things that we're upset about, right? Possibly the reason why these things are getting real attention now is people are rethinking rethinking their choices. They're trying to rewrite their own personal possible history or connection to these stories. And I wish we were a little more honest with ourselves and others, and we could say, yeah, I listened to that film and I saw it in I think Avatar was 2007 or something.
Yeah, it was a long time. They just filmed 3 of them in a row, and they're going to release the first of 3 coming out soon. But that's why they're re-releasing Avatar. That's why it's in the news.
Is it the new one that is so controversial?
It's the old one is being re-released.
All right.
And it's causing, I guess, obviously if something old comes back out and people are like, let's go see this. And like, whoa, I didn't realize this was so offensive.
Sure. Yeah.
And as you say, in 2007 is a long time ago. So the kids of this generation are now adults with, actual opinions and real life experience at this point. And, but with that said, they're re-releasing it in preparation for the new trilogy that's coming out, which is going to be 2, 3, and 4. But I do agree, like, there needs to be diversity, and I think there's always been diversity in the shadows. Like, obviously, when people are writers, you and I, we write professionally. However, before we wrote professionally doesn't mean we didn't write. So writers write.
Sure. Writers are writing whether someone's paying them to write or not. Yeah,
exactly. And what it comes down to, I think, are the money people, which you said, that's what it is. It's about money, and the money people need to allow diversity. I personally feel it shouldn't be diversity for diversity's sake, just to get the points. Like someone's like, oh, we need to fill some boxes. So I don't think that's
that's performative, though. That wouldn't even be because they wanted diversity. That would be because, like you said, they'd want to be filling boxes.
Correct. Yeah. And I think, and I don't like to say talent, but I think people who have the encouragement, the motivation, that are true leaders in the art world, deserve that right to be exposed into the matrix of our life, artistically speaking. And the money people should let those voices come up. And by doing so, like a producer getting the chance to come up would be able to bring up the people that they believe in. And that's the same with writing novels. It doesn't matter, even the comedy world. But I do agree with you that the diversity has to be more aware. But I don't think it should be. I talk about the seesaw effect. They're like, oh, we got to do only diversity, and get rid of any other expression. Because I had a show. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just adding on. I agree with the seesaw effect, but it just made me think of some other It's an interesting thing, again, because we're at this time in history. There is no good answer for this because we have not done it. If you
Exactly.
show me the time frame in which everyone's been equal and we've actually been participating in a functioning version of this, then my shoulds and coulds get a little different. But because it doesn't exist, what I think's happening is everyone's spaghettiing the wall. And they're
Yeah, yeah,
trying a bunch of things at once. And the truth is art has always been under the fire of criticism.
yep,
And it's always been on the forefront of culture, and there are people that dislike certain aspects of how the culture shifts, but at that same rate, you have dollars and you have eyeballs and you have votes and you have the whole ability to see it. And if the money people are making money off making a dancing jelly bean, they will do it. And
yeah,
that's not to say they don't care about content or they don't care about, but they're not there to morally gatekeep us. We as viewers who have access and the ability to turn it off, or we as museum goers have some of that vote.
yeah,
We as artists have some of that vote. We as the public have some of the vote. And if people are, raging out in large enough, numbers to tear down the walls of Avatar because of whatever it's done, then that's kind of Avatar's problem. Like
yeah,
that's kind of the art's problem. Same token, we can really, we can push people as a person who has native descent, partial native descent. Um, yeah, that's the reason I didn't see Avatar.
yeah,
To be frank, from the first one, it wasn't because I had a feeling about the controversy one way or the other. It was just I could see from the very small amount of exposure I got to it that that's probably a journey for somebody else.
yeah.
And forgive me that I'm not saying we can always figure out which ones are for us and which ones aren't, but it is honestly in my gut why I've never watched it.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
there's definitely but that's the thing, and you're 100% right. As the audience has control over what they choose to see, and if enough people choose not to see something, the money people are going to say maybe we shouldn't invest in that,
the
and
one
it's the main reason we have superhero movies. And I started in comic books, so I'm happy, but at the same time, it's like, could we get another Shawshank Redemption out there? Could
sure. But
right?
the superhero story we love, because that's the human crux of what we're all trying to figure out. Are we
Yeah,
good or evil, right or wrong? My goodness, which side of the coin do you fit on? Are you the
absolutely.
villain that should be the hero or the hero that really is slightly villainous? Like, which version of you? And I think that's the problem with humans, period. All of this
Yeah,
is that complex issues are getting boiled down into what feels like one-sided situations because we have a media right now, like a world right now, that lives on very small sound bites of information. And yeah, this is
yeah.
part of the issue. Anyway, I may have taken you off track, but
No. You trust me. It's wherever it goes, right? And
there.
I appreciate your mind. So, um, and also, you saying that you have a descent, indigenous descent. Obviously, you have a voice in this conversation, and it's good to hear where you're at, and to know why you didn't see Avatar is 100%, founded.
And it wasn't a huge mental protest either. It was
Yeah,
just a choice. I saw blue creatures. It looked like it was nativism. I went, nope, not for me. But other people, maybe they had a deeper, the other side to that argument, because I don't want to push this side either out of the picture, which is there are lots of people that don't have a voice for whatever reason. They can't, they don't want to vocalize these things. They feel they can't vocalize these things, but who are affected. And I can't just lay on the side of only the money people will make the money making things, because as
yeah,
we've seen throughout history, your last name and mine originally also not a time where everybody gets the same shakes. So I also can't lie and say, oh, I think they're wrong. Maybe they're not wrong.
yeah.
Literally, some of this storming the castle isn't about the art. It's about a completely different part of the industry that we're in, and the tunnel from what stories got chosen and what stories got played.
Yeah,
um
and speaking on the inside of the industry, now that you bring that up a little bit, and I feel, being in this business for over 20 years, one of the things I learned from experiencing new writers, new creators, is it's always about them. I wish they would take a chance on my writing, blah, 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 right? And I agree. Art should be out there. Everyone should get a chance. We're all artists, but
Sure.
you're in the industry, and you're saying very important key points of notes is that, look, it's not just the money people, like you're saying. I get it. It's also the people who are willing to take a chance on you, but they don't want to take a chance on you just because you have something to say. Like, I always tell people, what do you bring to the table? You're not getting signed and you're not getting hired because you write or you have the skill. There has to be something else you bring to the table. Are you a problem solver? Are you good around other people? Are you willing to change an idea? Are you willing to listen? Are you good at listening? Are you good at brainstorming? Are you good? And what are your thoughts on that when it comes to those newer writers that don't really understand the industry? They're just like, no, it's my art. It should be about art first.
I would say okay, so I went to USC. One of the first things that I noticed at USC on the campus was the headliner, reality stops here. It's a great little intro as you're walking in the film school. It's wonderful. And I remember the day I was called in to go and talk to the counselor about what my next classes were and what not. And I sat down in front of his desk for the very first time, and he had a tiny little plaque sitting on his desk that said, reality starts here. And the truth of the matter is, we aren't just artists. We aren't just creatives. That's what the industry is. It's an industry. It is a capitalist society. And so therefore it is a capitalist industry.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. The stories are stories. It isn't just a ticket to be able to tell what you think. It's not just it's an actual business in which people are doing a variety of things. The directive of the studios, the directive of the collective powers that be, which is just people like you and I who have gotten it together enough to convince another group of people that we have the production ability to make a thing happen. When they magically decide that it is you that they want to take that chance on, they're hiring you to be an artist. They are a lot of times. They're also hiring you to do a very specific thing that they have hired you to do. And so if you're Jordan Peele and you've proven to their world that you have an opinion, your opinion's interesting, and you have written a million things, and you have been on a sketch comedy show for a bit, I bet you get a better deal than if you're someone in, wherever that has a very good idea, but it's an idea and they haven't formulated or fleshed it or have any reason why their way of telling it is particularly box office draw. Think a lot of writers get frustrated with the idea of putting big names or putting a draw into the price. Yeah. And it's all part of the package. Listen, why is someone going to take that dollar, spend it on that film versus that film? And if you can, the more, as even a writer, the more you can click off those boxes without damaging your story.
Yeah.
The more appealing you are. It's the same as real estate. You bought a house in a great neighborhood and you fixed it up and you made it even greater. Yes, you're going to probably sell it. Yeah. If you've already got a ripe audience. I think what really people lean into too much, though, to be fair, and granted, if they're listening to your podcast, they're probably trying to lean into professional opinions. But what they lean into too much is they lean into the idea that the fictionalized version of what being a writer is in Hollywood is the actual truth of what being a writer is in Hollywood. And that is, it's just, for my experience, it's not real. It's, people are shocked all the time. I have 17 scripts, 17 that I don't shop. It's not that I can't shop them. It's that they sit there because I haven't found the right moment to shop that one or shop this one, or this is a great idea, but or it passed its prime. Wow, that would have been great if we were in a different climate where that question was still on the table. We've solved that question for whatever reason as people, so we've moved on to the next. Yeah. And I think that's actually the thing, is that you writing your great script is not the same brain as selling your great script. So you want to ask me about being a writer, I'll tell you about all these wonderful things and how you can sit and you can write it by hand and you can do it from a mountaintop. And why not take a vacation, do it on your vacation? Why not do it for
Yeah.
over 17 years? Like write a sentence a day for 7, if it's for art's sake, you have a lot of options. If what you're doing though is trying to make a living being paid to write things,
Yeah.
then you have a window, you have time. It changes all the time. There are directives from all the studios that they choose. They know right now which direction they're going. You want to speak to that because they're not buying what they already have said. They're not
Hmm.
buying what they're no longer. So, a lot of writers aren't aware of that. They aren't aware of the fact that one script, if it's, I don't want to discourage anybody, but if it's your profession and you're struggling on your first script, you need to be very clear with yourself and ask yourself, what can I do to
Yeah.
stop struggling? Because I need to have 5 of these. And it
Yes.
does, it's not, I'm not trying to be rude about it. It's just what it is. It's if I sit down with a meeting or with someone and they have a directive that isn't something I've written to, I have to be very quick in switching my personal inquiry conversation over to something that makes sense for one of the other pieces I have.
Yeah.
And that's something I think writers don't ever practice before they go on meet and greets. And I think
Yeah.
that's crazy. It's how many different ways can I spin this? If they mention broccoli, can I tie this film into broccoli? You know what I mean? How do I do that? And that business of sale, most of my experience is the reason why I've had some success in that is that I grew up in advertising, I grew up in marketing, I grew up in a world in which I understand what these principles are. And even I knowing all of that and applying that and even working for the industry and
Yeah.
selling films that they've already made, that was a much, much more valuable tool than some of the things I spent most of my minutia in, which was the craft of writing. Talk to me about the craft of writing in relationship to the speed of writing by which one has to get things done. That's when you start listening to your fellow experts.
Yeah.
It's not because you're listening really, or at least I don't think you need to be listening to me to tell you how to develop a story. What I think you need to be listening to me about is, hey, so here's the thing. 16 people that I know went to these 5 companies. This is how they were responded to. Now we need to go over this direction. Maybe
Yeah.
you should write that story. And right now we're in a great spot. Authenticity is very popular right now. Humans that are writing about their real life stories that they've gone through are very popular right now.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where I think I'd rather see people lead that energy and time.
Yeah, and what you're saying is that I love that you said you got to come in with 5 because that's what I was always taught. That's what I've always experienced, and I tell people that, and they go 5, and I go, yeah, you need 5 backups. You need because they're not hiring you for that thing; they're hiring you for a relationship.
Correct. And they're also possibly not hiring you for that thing, but they might actually grab this other thing,
Yeah,
or there's a pattern, yeah, like you said, a relationship or a pattern in what you write about or a specialty that you have. I mean, it's different if you're trying to staff. It's
yeah,
different.
yeah.
You need as much. But
And another thing that like I want to bring up, that about the industry is a lot of times when I talk to creatives, especially screenwriters or even novelists and stuff like that, they always want to be. I want to make a living doing what I want to do. I want my script, and and uh, and I always tell them a little story where I had an agent come to me once. By the way, they wanted money, so they weren't a real agent. They were, this is a while ago, and they started off nice, but when I was like, well, I'm not paying an agent, then it turned into, yeah, but you're not really a successful writer. I go, why not? And they go, you're not writing Marvel movies. And I go, but I pay my bills as a writer. And they go, but you're not selling your own stuff. I go, I get hired to help other writers. I write other people's stories. I
yeah,
clean up other people's stories because I'm in the industry and that makes me happy. And then I could write my own stuff and that's the art. But the business, I want to make money doing this.
right.
And creatives don't really think like that often because they go, I have a story, I have a script, I have a book, I have a this. And that's the only thing that will make me feel happy in this industry. It's like, no, get involved.
Yeah.
Start at the bottom, do the stuff you hate until you're able to do the stuff you love.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
very valid. I mean, and also, I don't know that I mean, no offense to anything I've ever been hired to write on, but I don't know the last time that other than getting something of my own sold. I don't know the last time that I was like, "Oh, you know what I can't wait to do?" I mean, I do. I do have those moments, but I have it was a funny story. I was doing some copywriting for something, and it was just I got obsessed over the idea of being part of a raisin campaign.
Yeah.
And the person was like, "Why are you so into this being the next campaign that you're on?" And this was a while back, but I was
Yeah.
like, I'm so into this campaign because I grew up in the Central Valley. I have a connection to the Josefa Chavez, the
Yeah.
original protest. I was very curious about it. I've never been on this particular group of people's, plantations of raisins.
Yeah.
And I would love to check out, like, what do they do? How do they do it? What are their, and the person looked at me and said, "It's all personal though. Like it has nothing to do with the brand." And I went, "Oh no." Because the brand just is hiring me to find a thing I'm passionate about in
Yeah.
that world. And I take a lot of that branding and social advice. I take it a lot back to my writing. It's probably something I inherently always did. I think it's why you and I even know each other, because I was sort of saber rattling at a time. But a lot of it is just you have to find the passion within the thing, not the other way around.
Yeah.
And then if you can and you do and you're wonderful and you have this opportunity to pitch something original and someone loves it and they like it, but I think we're getting too enamored with the dream,
Yeah.
I and not as I don't like the idea of always work on your craft, work on your craft, work on your craft, because people can overwork themselves.
Yeah. In fact, they'll become the walls. They'll say, "Well, I can't
Mhm.
approach people in the industry until I'm good enough." And
Oh,
it's
no,
like
approach everybody all the time. Tell
every
them
time.
you suck. Tell them you
Yeah.
just started and you suck. Like, some of the greatest relationships that I have are people who approached me who have said I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I don't even know where to start. And my answer to that every time is great, because that was my intro into this. Actually, of all people, I had a really funny incident when I was trying to make my way, and not to name drop, but this is a funny story. Colin Trevorrow, who is a director that originally did a piece called Safety Not Guaranteed, and then went on to do one Jurassic World or something like that. I met him really early on, and this was another one of those weird little life lessons. I met him because I stalked him at a Sony. I did at a Cinegear Expo, which is for cinematographers. I was working as a gaffer at the time. I had not seen Safety Not Guaranteed, but I had figured out that Sony had these great little free things that would happen at the end of the conference, and that you should go because there were these, whoever made the film and the director usually talks. And I went, and he spoke, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And the movie was awesome. This is Safety Not Guaranteed. The movie was awesome for a little indie film. He was there. The DP was via Skype, I think, before Skype was even cool. And whatever, Zoom was cool. But whatever. It's so, and afterwards, I remember thinking, wow, that was a great movie, just unbelievably good, and it would be really great to be able to do this, and da da da. And I remember, I saw Colin walking out of the theater, and he went over to the sandwich board, which announced the film, and
Yeah.
he closed the sandwich board and he picked it up and he walked away. Just as he did that, I ran up to him and said, "Hi, I don't have any idea why I want to talk to you. I don't have any idea why I want directly for us to engage, but my name is Meggy and I don't know what I'm doing. And I really want to know if you'll be my unofficial mentor, and would that be okay? And can I write you?" And he literally, looked at this child screaming and hollering, and looked at him and said, or looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's great. But I just want you to know something. I don't know what the hell I'm doing either." And I thought, wow, none of us really know. And then it was such a revelation to realize he's picking up his own sandwich board to take it back to the zone, to take it back to Paramount Law, to turn in his own thing, that all the illusions start to disappear once you come to a city like this. And actually, I think that's why most people don't make it. Talk about
Yeah.
a lot of why do people not make it. A lot of people don't make it because they get to a city and it's not the dream. It's behind stage. It's not in front, and
Yeah.
and they have an illusion or of what we're good doing. And we're no good for our own selves, those of us who are in the industry, because we're spinning the illusion just like everyone else. So,
Yeah.
and there's some benefit. I could go on a long thing of how there's benefit for writers not to help other writers. I think actually, funny enough, you should soak up the ones that do want to help you, because there's a lot that don't.
Yep.
And that's because we're in competition for very limited slots of money and very limited slots of jobs. And the closer and closer and closer you get to the core of the industry, it's just a reality that some people are amazingly helpful, and some people will give you some help, and some people give you zero help, and some people will be resentful that you're a new guy on the block. But those things, that believing in the dream and the fighting the people fight, that's actually, those are the things that you have to master. The writing part, I don't want to be disrespectful to our art, but that isn't the hardest part. And that's the part everybody wants to focus on.
Yeah, especially because our job as writers are not editors. Our job is to get 100%. The story on page.
100%. And there's us, and then there's whoever is directing, which sometimes, if you're lucky, is you as well. But then there's, even once you've directed, now you have your editing team, then you have your producing team, then you have then here's the part that blows people's minds that aren't even in the industry. Then it gets sold to somebody whose specific language in their contract says, I can completely re-edit this into anything I want it to be.
Yeah.
When you sell to a distributor, I mean, I'm not going to argue, there's contracts that do it and blah, 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 but most distributors have the right to re-edit in any way they see fit when they release it. And they do. When they release things internationally, they do. And
especially, back in our era, you'd watch a movie that was on regular television with commercials, and it was a completely different movie. They had different, sometimes different music, right? And it was just like, what's going on here?
Watch one on a plane, watch one in international release. I mean, one of my favorite things is to watch old trailers from, I think it was one about the Dark Crystal, where it was the trailer of the American version. This from the original 70s version. And then it was the trailer of the UK version. The UK version had no words. The American version is like, tale of a guy that does a thing, and there's like, it's because the UK at the time felt that it was not appealing. I saw it when we did the piece for Netflix. We had an international release, and so what you saw was the covers from multiple different international releases. And what was significant to them in that particular market. In an American market, people didn't know these illustrators that were working for Netflix Japan, because that a lot of people have a lot of misconception about that piece. They don't realize it was made by Netflix Japan, So for Netflix Japan, and got a whole different conception. And that's another one of those. What's the perception? What's the truth? And how is art, and how does it affect us? But it is interesting to see that in cultures that recognize some of these illustrators, that was the draw of that piece. So for them. And so, but we had no say in that. I had no say in that. Yeah, sure, there was a production company, and I'm an additional writer. That is not the job that people think that is, Funny what people think my job is. People think I have so much power. They think I hold a golden pen and can just it's to some degree, yes. If they're doing it right, sure. If they're following the rules, sure, that's what's supposed to happen. But
so what you're saying, if you're not Quentin Tarantino, you can't be like, that's not what I wrote in the script.
Even Quentin Tarantino can't do that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, I'm not trying to. I mean, by the time you're on set, if you're going, you're literally losing it. If you're the director, like there's something else wrong. This is not just the only problem you have. It's a fantasy, and I don't mind that. I like to try to hone people in on, okay, cool. Now, why are you doing? Is it to make money? As my one professor once said, you will make more money selling houses. So real estate is your gig. Is it for access? Access to what? Because if you just write anything, you're not going to gain access to everything. So you better start writing about the things you want to gain access to, because those are the only people you're going to gain access to once you've written a thing. And even then, not really, because they might decide they don't like what you did. there's a whole bunch of like, it's dangerous for acceptance. Oh, good luck on that one. I can go on and on about what happens to your friends and family when you get into this business. And it's not because of anything bad. You just,
Yeah.
it's a conscious human experience to have to go for this thing. So now you have to ask yourself, why this? Why this over all the other things? For me, the answer is simple. I quite frankly can't live not telling people story. That's just the
Yeah.
bottom line. I can't do it. And I can't do it. And it's either this or me and a sandwich board outside trying to entertain the masses, right? So that's why I'm here. And I find a lot of writers specifically, that's what it is. They have a story they want to get out of them. They have a story they want to tell. A legacy they want to leave, an arrogance they want to spread to the
Yeah.
world. And that's what we are.
I won my Oscar.
Yeah, and sometimes it is driven by that. Sometimes, and that's fine. Like that is every person's prerogative.
Yeah.
There's also being driven by, a lot of things I do. I'm like, oh, we're gonna save the world. Are we? I don't know, but that's my general motivator. So I love the dreaming, but I also want us all to get very real with the steps, get really real with the fact that as a writer in this business, even with an agent, even with a manager, even with a team of people that support you and love you, even with every single one of your friends in tech since you came out of the womb, and none of them got jealous and none of them got weird, none of them assumed that you had a better thing going on than you really did. Imagine all of this not to be true, right? Imagine you've got it all made. You still got to figure out how come you're motivated to get up every morning and continue doing it, because there's a lot that goes on in every business, in any job. You're not always going to do what you love. You're going to do what you're paid to do, which is be professional, on time, right? Do it fast, come up with multiple ideas. Give me 18 ways to say it. I'll pick one, not you, so.
And also don't be offended when they don't like your idea. Like that's not,
You're a very strange response people have is, I mean, I say, go out and get your stuff rejected.
Yeah.
Go tell 100 jokes and have people just stare at you. Like literally go get rejected more. If you're afraid of being rejected, go get rejected more.
Yeah. Yeah. Being rejected, I think, is the best lesson you can get in this industry, because especially when you're growing up around your friends and family, of course they're going to love the stuff you make. They have to. It's in the contract, But I have this person I know where they said that they didn't want to be actors, kind of. But then the drama teacher was like, "Hey, you should be in this. You'd be good for this." And the drama teacher and the person were really good friends, and they became better friends every year. And he always got the leads because she would just cast him as the lead, right? And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to be an actor. This would be great." He says when he got out, the first hint of reality was, "I am not going to be cast in anything." It's not, this is a different process. I thought it would be much easier. And I'm realizing I need to know people. And it's like, yes, you do need to know people.
Right.
And, and it hits you. It hits you.
But the funny thing is the needing to know people part is even a little askew for people. I think, now with the internet, you actually have a better chance of meeting the people that you want to meet. You really do. You have a lot better chance of reaching out. And the people you want to meet are not the people with the names necessarily right at first. I mean, the people you want to meet are the people that are grinding and doing and are at the same levels. But we're in a very interesting time where, I went to a party last night, and at 12:30 in the morning was offered a job. It's not because of, I could tell you some fantastic reason. It's not that. It's the fact that the person I was sitting across from does the other side of the job. I was talking about what I do, talking about something I was working on, and that person had a need for what I was doing and what I was working on. So the networking that everybody thinks everyone's doing, the glad handing, the calling them up, the hitting people up, the query letters, like don't stop doing it. But all of that working, I find very unfruitful. But what I do find fruitful is finding common interests and then getting in the conversation, which I could get in a much larger conversation as to why it's easier now in LA and in other areas that there's a hub and people meet each other. But that is the truth of why people say, you have to move to LA. No, you don't. But you're going to miss the thing where you go to the thing and at 12:30, someone says, hey, but it doesn't mean you have to miss the thing online in which you meet a bunch of people and you start talking to them and you end up on a podcast. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah.
each level is its own version of picking through things.
Yeah, and two things to that point is, I tell people, I know you probably, I do like how to be successful video, and like, I consult people and stuff. And one thing I usually come down to, people, like you said, they think networking is handing out a card or contacting someone to curate, and that's actually marketing, right? Because
Right.
you're not working on the relationship, you're just saying, hey, I exist,
Right.
which is marketing.
Brand
And
recognition. Yeah.
yeah, look, hey, I have a book or I have a script. You should use. That's 100% marketing, right? And networking, I always tell people, your networking is building and cultivating relationships to develop a strong circle of influence. A circle of influence is not a circle of people who can influence your career. It's people who influence better habits, right?
Sure.
And the second point to that is, a lot of people want to work with the next Denzel. They want to work with Denzel Washington or Steven Spielberg, but they don't want to work with the next Denzel Washington or the next Steven Spielberg. And you said it 100%. You got to start working with people at your level and that are kind of in and around what you're doing, because they are the next level.
Oh yeah, and yeah, for sure. And also, if you shoot your shot too early, a lot of sad tales within okay, a lot of people are worried about, oh, they're going to rip me off, or they're going to do this to my script or that to my script. And you want to know my real take on that? And I hate it.
Yeah,
It's
go.
real. So yeah, that happens sometimes. I've had it happen. I had something happen where I took it to someone and they got mad and they took it and blah, 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 right? Early in my career, didn't know how to sell, all of those things. You should protect yourself 100%. But bigger issue is when you bring something, and I can honestly say in this case that this is what happened, brought something half cooked, pretty good, a little weirder than anyone wants to take a chance on. They dialed it back because it was unrealistic of me to think that I would go there from where I was.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks they're the most creative creature in the whole wide world until you get into that realization that somebody has to pay for this, right?
Yeah.
And but truthfully, it wasn't ready. I don't mean that like I wrote really well and I did what I could do and it wasn't ready to go on a screen. It wasn't. They were not going to take that little script and with very minimal effort be able to plug that into a crew and say, now give us a product.
Yeah.
It was almost as much effort they would have to go through with me because of the realization that it wasn't ready. They were almost as rewriting it. And so they did. You know what I'm saying? And my take on the whole stealing, and we are definitely in that culture. People have it happen to them all the time. It really is a real thing. But it's much less lucrative for them to steal from people when they are ready to go and they agree. They're afraid of the way people react. A lot of people, they start to give them 2 cents back and they don't want to hear it. And they immediately go, I don't want to work with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're in a pitch meeting where you're trying to sell me, and I'm like, "Hey, what about this?" And you're like, meh, meh.
That's not what I wrote.
That's great. Like, it's honestly great if you've already made money doing that. You have a little bit of that you can carry on. But yeah, if you didn't, I don't know. You really can't. How do you respond to that? They're the people that ultimately have to go sell the cupcake after you make it. If they say, I'm not so sure about chocolate chips or oatmeal cupcakes, are you sure? Like, you can push for it, but if you're wrong, if you do it and you come out there, then they can also take you out at the knees the next time. So I don't know. A lot of times I think the reason all of that's happening is we're just not ready. And ready is different than being a good writer.
Well, yeah. That's the. But a lot of people think they're ready. A lot of people are like, oh, I have a morsel of an idea. Yeah. And, one thing I was taught, and, obviously there's different ways for everything. But I was taught to have a finely polished concept to have for the pitch. And then those other 5 projects can be a mixture of treatments, log lines, or concepts.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And because of that, part of my creative sessions, because, I give myself like time blocks of like, this will be, I go, let me just brainstorm ideas. And then I have blocks where I just go, let me take those ideas and turn them into treatments. And let me turn those ideas and turn them in. And some people, they'll spend years on one project
Oh yeah.
to make it perfect. And you go, look, first of all, you should just be trying to get in to be an assistant and not even for a writer, just like, let me work on the desk at like a
Yeah, so you
production
can see
company.
what it really looks like. Because if
Yeah.
you think you know what it looks like and then you go watch it for real, those illusions will go away really fast.
Yeah.
They really will. They'll be that one thing that you're not having to chase anymore is the illusion, because you will see that they don't have the time, the energy,
Yeah.
the money, it's just a tunnel. And you're right. You should go work. They should go work on a desk, because that would make them more ready.
Yeah. Yeah. They would, we're being visited by my child. Hey,
Oh, hello,
Period.
child.
He's a
Hello,
little Rottweiler. He's
child.
like, hey.
Hello, babies.
On the radio, you can't see his nose, but on the YouTube, you can. He's like, I'm trying to talk to him. No.
Yep.
But to that point where it's like you got to get involved, and it's not about having the perfect thing. Every successful story that I've read about successful people has started out as a nobody. Steven Spielberg was somebody that ran around on the lot until somebody was like, hey, I heard you want to be a director. Do you want to work on this Jaws? George Lucas, he had to do things he didn't necessarily want. And then he had to sacrifice to get Star Wars. And those are two major names. And it's like
Yeah.
that with even Quentin Tarantino or Kevin Smith. They're like, well, he got discovered in his whole life. No, Kevin Smith may have got discovered, quote unquote, but a lot of his work came because he did cleanup work. He got hired to clean up scripts, and he got hired to, and they were like, well, you're doing all this. We're gonna kick. And that's why when he did Mallrats and it failed, they were like, we're gonna give you another shot. And then he did Chasing Amy, and then in Dogma, and because he was helping others, he was doing what he could for others. And they might not, like, he did Superman Returns, the original script for it. I'm sure he was. Actually, he's even said in interviews, he's like, I'm the wrong guy for this, but they wanted me to do it. I was going to do it, But the first thing they said is they don't want him to have a cape, and he's going to fight a polar bear. And he was like, "What?"
Great. So,
that'll be
totally not the Superman I've ever dealt with before. All right, I'll make that happen.
But you paid the check, so Superman will fight polar bears.
Totally.
And spiders and whatever else it was. I do want to ask you a couple of questions about the industry a little bit. Specifically though, I mean, where's my question? Oh, here it is. With your career, because I'm union. I'm SAG union
Right.
for the acting world, and you're a part of the WGA, and which is the Writers Guild of America for the people.
But let me correct you.
Oh, go for it.
No, I am not a part of the WGA, and I can explain why you think I am and why I am not.
All right, go for it. Let me hear this.
It's not a bad thing. I encourage everyone to actively be a part of the Writers Guild. What is happening to me right now is, with pandemic and other things, you go through the reality of being a union member is that you are or you are not, based on the points and the things you have written recently. Yeah. And this is another thing people do not actually understand about union work or work in general. They don't understand. So I was actually never a member of WGA, even when you saw me in the Twitter world talking about solidarity. My reasons that I came to that were very different. And it had to do with being someone who got out of film school in 2008, 2009, in the heels of the first strike, which was actually SAG strike, and it ended up being a writer strike. And the impact it had on the industry and the way that everyone in my graduating class from one of the top universities in the world were shut out of jobs. Wow. And what happened to us? And we got pushed to a very weird corner. And that's why YouTube grew, to be honest. It's a lot of our resources went straight into that, which we were all told in film school to never touch. Yeah. And it all blew up. And friends of mine helped create some of the reasons we have advertising on YouTube. You can blame them for the issues that we have. But my point of saying all that is I was not WGA even when I was hosting the mixers. Yeah. What I was doing was knowing, having so many people who were in all of the guilds, understanding that there's levels even to that. So when people really want to talk to me about what the guild means, The guild, there are people that you and I brand recognize know, and those people are very well known. Then there are a whole bunch of people in the middle, and those people are the ones either jockeying for jobs on programs they've already, have a chance with. Those are the people that really can be qualified to go into some of the slots that are available on open call. Yes, the union's trying to make them also employable and get them into jobs, but everybody's got an obligation to make so many points every year or they're no longer a union member. So the bridge for me, and one of the reasons that WJ was interested in talking to me beginning, was that I really wanted to create a pathway to entry for young writers who were not yet at a place. You can, right now, there are ways you can get into these unions with the right amount of money, with a person who wants to make a project with you. Like there are ways in that are not necessarily the way that you would dream, to be writing, and someone, you're a star, let me put you in, and you can do a lot of that by producing your own material for the independent market and doing a lot of other ways. What's actually impressive about unions, though, is that once they do have their membership, they will fight furiously and vigorously for what they believe the collective wants, needs, and can, sustain. Without it, it's just like you in a trench coat. and at least, like, with the unions, you've got 3 other, raccoons inside. So, but I always correct people, because the assumption was always that I must be guild because I was so pro guild and so pro solidarity.
Oh,
And
all right.
I was never guild, and I never tried to claim guild. I just am saying I am part of a writers collective that falls in and out of union affiliation, but my heart is always with them.
That's fine. I work in and out with the Producers Guild and the Directors Guild, but I am not a part of
Sure,
it.
but I think that's an important thing to clarify for people, because
Yeah.
people think it's a once you're in, and once you're out, and they think it's a thing that everyone is maintaining all the unions all the time, and we're not. We're jumping from one to the other. So
Yeah, it's and definitely if you go to their websites, they tell you what the point requirement is.
I was also going to say too, I want to go into that because I wanted to change. Like, I want to hear your question. I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I definitely do want to go into a little of that history of that, because I think people don't understand the writing game is always a struggle, and the union is definitely part of the goal, but that helps the struggle. And
Yeah.
that's what is the most interesting about the struggle, is the fact that we have this opportunity to band together, which as artists, there's almost no other opportunity to do that. Sometimes in craftspeople, but
Yep.
it's a beautiful thing. And I hope everyone eventually gets to join. That is great.
Well, yeah, and I believe there are certain jobs that are union only, just
There
like
are.
in the acting world. Yeah, so
And it depends on where you get hired in the process. Like, a lot of people have that misconception, I understand, because
yeah,
I wrote for Netflix, but I wrote for the production company, and that was not guild affiliated when we wrote it. And then it became guild affiliated later. So it's a really interesting, or
yeah,
it's part of the Netflix chain. And our take was slightly different because we're in documentary world. The same thing goes for people that write animation. There's a totally different space for them.
yeah.
So, it is a funny game, but also, with that being said, I have a project that's coming up that if we're not a guild affiliated, then we can't do it. So I will be guild affiliated at that point.
Yeah, yeah, they'll
It
give
is
it to
how
you.
it
I think
works.
it's like
Yeah.
a Taft-Hartley and SAG.
Oh
They
no, it's
basically,
a little, it's an interesting game, because you can easily. I mean, I don't want to say easily.
yeah,
That diminishes how difficult it actually is. You can There are pathways that are available to
yeah,
writers right now. If they can go out and finance their own film and get a signatory note and join based on a film that they're making, they can do that. And
yeah,
it's funny to me that there's so much struggle of, how do I do this? How do I get an agent? How do I get into the union? How do I do this? The reality is, you do it when you need to do it,
yeah,
because it is important for the job you're doing. But it shouldn't be the only goal.
yeah.
It should definitely be one of the goals. And
Which,
that's
by the way, you answered the question I was going to
oh,
ask.
well, there you go.
Oh, so,
Sorry
thank you
about
for
that.
that.
Yeah, a little
No,
talk.
no, no,
Got
no.
it.
I only ask questions that my guests are going to say anyway. In fact, the majority of our conversation has been already like, I was like, oh, I don't have to answer all.
Yeah, good.
None of
Well,
these
there you
questions are needed. None of these prompts, which is good. But I do want to get to a couple of things, and then we can cut the episode, because I like to try to keep it about an hour. First and foremost, you're the 10th and final guest of season 1, so that's pretty exciting.
Beautiful. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
And we're gonna try to do a season 2, but we're gonna take a little hiatus. That's what I like to do. I like to take a little break,
Sure.
and then we do 10 episodes. And one of the questions I find myself enjoying asking people, especially in your situation in the industry, is this very particular question, and then we'll say our goodbyes.
Okay.
Here it is. What was a misconception of the industry that turned out to be wrong or misleading, and how did you feel when you learned that it was different than what you thought?
Probably the biggest piece of information that would probably be beneficial for someone listening is that I learned that film, unlike a lot of industries, has a lot of people who want to tell you things about it, who have never been involved in it. And so it is hardest, I think, to separate those who know something and those who think they know something. And it's one of the reasons I'm careful with sometimes what I want to say to people, because I understand that that was probably the most time wasting aspect of what I thought was real about the industry. I did think it was very simplified. I thought that it worked in a certain way. I had dreams of, walking in, oh, this is amazing. You are the greatest storyteller on the earth, and I'm going to make all these films. And instead, what I found is it's a much slower process than that. It's a much every level is learning okay, well, what did they do, and how does that work, and what does this mean, and and how does that fit in, and realizing things like, a lot of young writers, they'll see me and they'll go, oh, I want to write directly for Netflix, and I'm like, I mean, yeah, sure, great, but the truth is that's probably the least lucrative thing you're going to do. And no offense to Netflix or any of the streamers, because they're doing what they're doing. But yeah, you want to connect to a production company that you have experience with. You want to know that they've already brought something to fruition that you like and enjoy. You want to talk to them. You really almost have no reason to talk to the streamers until you have something that makes sense to actually talk to them about distributing. If you don't have something to distribute, they do make originals. You can do that. It's better to have an agent or somebody who is affiliated already with them speak to them a little bit. You can knock down their door, but then you better understand what door you're knocking down. And that was when I found out that wasn't real, that all of this stuff that that the Muppet movie had made it so simplified for me that I thought I had it all understood, and I did. When I figured that out and I went, oh, of course, of course, of course, of course. And what it made me feel like is that what I had chosen to do was a job.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a job I love. I'm thankful every time I get hired to do anything that's related to the process of writing. But it is a job. And it made me change my entire opinion of who I asked, who I talked to, who I got information from, who I even reacted to when they said things that I knew not to be true. There's no reason to be in that fight. Your Uncle Joe, who's never made a film and never even gotten involved in any aspect of making a film, probably isn't the insight you needed into your latest, greatest adventure.
But he watches movies.
Right. He watches movies, and that's amazing. That part everybody knows. But yeah. Once I realized that, it just changed my outlook on how I approached everything. It's also why I did more than just screenwrite. I mean, that's also why I went into other aspects. Your suggestion of being an assistant at a desk is not a bad idea, because there's so much more than the pen to paper to what it is that's out there.
Yeah.
And as a writer, if all you want to do is sit and write, and that's great, that's called being a novelist. And even then, you still have to deal with your publishers, and that's a whole other world. And so it's none of it is the cure-all. Writing a film is not going to make you more beloved to those around you. In fact, what's funny is almost none of them are going to watch it. They'll
Yeah.
say they watched it, and you can figure out real fast that they didn't, you know, and, once you realize that that's just it's none of the magic beans that you thought it was, and that it is just a job, and it's a fun, artistic, wonderful job, and you should keep trying for it, but
Yeah.
you don't delude yourself. Yeah, so that's all. It just made it much more practical to me and much more, and then that makes the writing less precious, because at that point it's not that you're trying to fulfill their every need, but you definitely get into a zone where you are just making the content you're willing to be a part of.
Yeah.
And even working in advertising, even working as a copywriter, that's something you have to make a choice of. If there's a film that you have say it's the Avatar film and you just don't want to work on that film, you have every right as someone who's contributing artistically to say this is not for me.
Yeah.
And to believe it or not, they will accept that answer because they don't want people writing for things that they can't or won't believe in. So I think that was the misconception. And then that was the reaction. And then funny enough, the round robin is where I thought it was inauthentic. I realized it's actually super authentic. And then once I realized how super authentic it was, I had to get real with the things that I needed as tools to be able to make that authenticity come to fruition as a job.
Yeah. You don't work a job. You're either the boss or you're not the boss. And in
Yeah,
the
it's
beginning,
kind of
you're
that.
not the boss.
Yeah, you're not the boss. When you're not the boss, you're not the boss.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and the truth is then also it's why I think writers and connecting to each other and even listening to podcasts like this are valuable, because even those of us who are in it and we know from a perspective, and I was the person on the other end of this podcast,
Yeah.
listening to people and trying to figure out where their perspective lies in things. And even with that, when you're that guy that doesn't know yet and you listen to those of us who say, oh, I have this piece of information, like, you still have to tailor that to your specific set of circumstances, your specific kind of writing. I mean, major showrunners, and I would never try to get on their shows.
Yeah.
It's not something that I would write to. It's not that they don't have a job. They do. I'm sure some of them would even hire me and I could take that job. But then you have to ask yourself, like, where is my time going? Where are my goals? What are my goals as an individual in this industry? What do I want to accomplish? For
Yeah.
me, I was a director that only started writing because I didn't like the material I was being handed to direct.
Yeah.
So we all come to it for a different purpose, and I think that blowing away those misconceptions that it is some sort of a magic wish machine, and it really is just the wizard behind the curtain, and realizing that's okay. That's just our goal is to get home, or it's to stay
Yeah.
here in Oz, or whatever it may be. But yeah, the goal doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be It doesn't have to be the kind of struggle people make it. They are
Yeah.
making it that way because they want the dream, and the dream is that I would sit magically in my home and someone would seep into my brain and there would be no process, and I would immediately be able to get all of my ideas on screen and everyone would say, "You're wonderful," and, "Isn't this fantastic?" And if without you, we would never. But even the Steven Spielbergs, I mean, we were lucky enough at USC to have Spielberg as one of the instructors.
Yeah.
And my greatest Steven Spielberg story was actually out of somebody that worked for a department for Amblin. And they said one day, Steven Spielberg, there was a cut of one of the films that they were working on, and they had a 3D cut and then the regular 2D
Yeah.
cut, and they were going to submit them both to Sundance. And the 3D cut, they had problems because the food chain and how they were getting things rendered and how the time frame was looking, and they weren't going to make it. They weren't going to make it. Even Spielberg doesn't get to, stop the festival. So they weren't going to make it in time. And everyone at Amblin apparently, or I think this was at Amblin, it was either Amblin or an affiliate of Amblin, but everyone there got very stressed out and had to make this call to Steven Spielberg and tell him that the thing that he'd been working on for all this time wasn't going to make it to the festival he wanted it to get in. And they were terrified, and they all thought they were going to lose their jobs. And they called him up and they said their piece. And he paused for a second and said, "Was the 2D print version going to be ready?" And they went, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh, okay, we'll submit that." and I went, "That's why he's Steven Spielberg."
Yeah. You got to adapt.
Yeah, he's adapting, he's not holding on to these things, they are just it is in the next one, and I'm not saying he doesn't care, I'm just saying it
Yeah.
is you have to it is what it is, it's not the dream, it's, if you're living your dream, that's great, but your dream is not the reality of the situation. If you're getting your dreams come true, that's much better.
Yeah.
That's an after fact.
And also, a good note for those listening is that if you're a writer, you have your dream, but remember, there's different variations of your dream, and as long as you're doing something within that dream, you're doing a great job. And I actually like a couple of things you said. I want to jump on those real quick.
Mm,
So, again, if somebody offered you Avatar and it's not what you want to write, what
sure,
you're saying is ultimately sticking to your brand because you as a writer get placed into what you write. So if you write
correct.
these things, that's who you are. And it's good to not say yes to every job just so you can be like, well, I am writing. And it's like, no, you're trying to create a career. And people who write sitcoms for a reason.
Mhm.
And you establish yourself in that world, and then once you have a name, then you could start kind of branching off. And that's why Quentin Tarantino writes Quentin Tarantino films, and Kevin Smith writes Kevin Smith films. So it's good as a writer to know what it is you want to say and what you're comfortable talking about in your projects, even if you're hired. Don't just work on jobs just because it's a paid gig. And Denzel Washington's a clear sign of making those good choices, as per Sidney Poitier saying, well, don't just take a gig for the money, take things that matter to you. And it's a good rule. And the other thing is, especially with like a Steven Spielberg or something like that, they created their own production company over time. And
Mhm.
you as a writer, you should start trying to find ways to be the boss
Yes.
and get to the level where you get to make the decisions and you have the team and you're the head writer. But again, if there's people with money involved, they will have a say. If just because you're a production company, even Tom Cruise, that probably like, hey, this is a crazy stunt. I don't know if you should do this. And then they have to get the okay. He has to get insurance. He has to say, there's a lot involved. And as a writer, don't allow your perception, what you think the industry is, to destroy your dreams. Learn to adapt and evolve as you need to and where you can. And even if you start off at the bottom.
Well, that's the other thing. I mean, I wanna that's another aspect of where your career trajectory goes, right? So, even though I'm sitting here and saying to as of today, right now, I am not a guild writer, um, I am doing a project right now where that was the reason it has taken the time it has taken is that that is one of the aspects of it. We have a production company we're working with. The creatives involved in this are making our own production company. The reason that we are doing that is that we have our element of what we're doing in production. They have their element. And at our stage, we are where we are and they are where they are. But we need our title card out there on front, because if you're coming for this special brand, you want to come through us and not necessarily through the production company we just worked with. It doesn't mean you can't. They're great. But the idea is, where are you looking? Who are you looking to? And you start to realize that, okay, that's part of the game too, is having a bigger say in the final product, having a bigger say in the final distribution deals. As an individual, especially a writer, you have very low power.
Yeah.
The other side of that is, on this project that I'm talking about, I'm one of the executive producers, but that took knowledge to get to. So
Mm-hmm.
it's for me, I think that there are writers, like I said, that want to just sit down and write. And I do want to do that. But this industry in my opinion, doesn't allow you to just put on one hat. You
Mm-hmm.
have to keep putting on new hats, even if you'll never do that job. And I think if you do that, you will continue to grow in your understanding. So when you do have an opportunity, like you said, I don't take every writing job that's given to me. In fact, I take very few. And to be real, I've stayed away from a lot of narrative storytelling that I know isn't my brand. And
Mm-hmm.
I had that experience on a very minor level in film school, where something that I wrote got very, very popular. And then I could have written all of the psychological thriller that I wanted to write for the rest of my universal time on the planet,
Yeah.
because I could have kept parlaying and parlaying and parlaying. I knew that wasn't my gig. So I only did what I thought spoke to what I want to do. So funny enough, when my IMDb, or you go onto my LinkedIn and you see the companies and the things that I've done and I've affiliated myself with. That's a very curated thing.
Yeah.
That's something that me as a writer, I chose to only do those things. But that didn't mean that I wasn't working in the industry or learning in the industry the whole time. I mean, I was working with producers, and I've worked with music supervisors, and I've worked with, I've worked on set. And for me, all of those things played into where my trajectory goes. I think the same's true. The Spielbergs and Spielberg didn't write his material, a lot of it, some
Yeah.
of it, but you can hear Lucas's story, and he wrote, but he also talked to a lot of other people, and there were a lot of other rewrites. And, so we all forget that these people that we're sort of following too, a lot of times, they aren't even doing the role that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
They were doing filmmaker role, and they were doing larger, how do I make my money out of other sub industries within the industries while I'm in this part of the industry? So if you can do that, I think then you're well healed, because you can weather storms that you don't even see coming. And being the boss is the goal of your own material. So,
and even being a boss, though, you said it, George Lucas may have written stuff, but he has to be able to listen. And something I always say, especially about tables, what do you bring to the tables? I always I go, look, you're there to lead, follow, and advise. Now, leading isn't taking over. It's inspiring and being proactive. Following isn't blindly, but saying, how do I elevate this mission? And advising is not that it's your way or the highway, but saying, here's some options for the next possibility. And being a great leader is not this is what my idea, and that's the only thing, and if you ever watch George, not just you, but the audience, if you watch George Lucas documentaries, one of the things that's really brilliant about him is he gives freedom to his creative teams. And then he comes in, he goes, I like this, I like that, I like where this is going. So he allows them to explore with a little bit of information, and then he goes from there. And that's such a beautiful, creative way to work with your team if you are a leader. It's something to, aspire to. Is, they're not there for you.
Yeah. I mean, why would you spend your money on somebody who is literally just there to put, pegs in holes? Like,
yeah.
I don't want to do that. I don't know what other I brought together right at the beginning of the pandemic. I brought together a bunch of writers. I was going to try something new. Unfortunately, my father got sick during the pandemic, and I had to take care of him. But at the beginning of that, I did that. And my goal was to put together a room full of writers who were better at whatever aspect of writing there was than I was. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean they're better at leading it or holding the story together or organizing it or figuring out how they all work together. But I literally have nicknames for people. I mean, I have hammers, and I hire at least if I'm going to do a project and it's just 3 of us even, and we're doing co-written thing, like, I make sure that one of the people on there is a hammer. I am not. A hammer is someone who will write and write and write and write, and they got 50 pages in 24 hours of 3 different ways that we can handle this scene. Hammers are an extraordinary breed. And not all hammers are creators.
That's true.
And hammers are great, but we also need a core group of creators and brains. And, sometimes junior writers get involved. And junior writers, believe it or not, if they are asked, which they often are, at least in the halls, junior writers, a lot of times, they are there for one specific thing. You may know a lot about ping pong, and that may be what got you this job, because none of us, we may all write story really well, but we have no concept of ping pong, and that's what you do. It's funny. I just saw something the other day where someone was hiring and they must love golf. And and that's it. It's the way of writing. We cannot write what we don't know, what we're not aware of, what we aren't into. I mean, it rings untrue for everyone else. So I do think that's a cool aspect too, is like, why would you want to surround yourself with people that are worse than you, unless what your dream is to be a dictator, in which case, again, wrong industry. This is actually difficult to be a dictator in this industry. There are better avenues,
especially with people who are worse than you, though, because how do you dictate something that they don't know?
Right. And then you just end up ultimately as the guy that's in charge of that project, looking like a schmo. Whereas if you do your job right, and Lucas, I mean, all respect to George Lucas, but Lucas is a perfect example. If you realize how many people are involved in a Lucas production and how many layers there are to this, it goes so deep. and it is so intense, and the money is coming from so many different directions for so many different things,
Yeah.
that most people don't realize that even off the last Star Wars, Lucas, I mean, granted, he sold it and all of that, but before he had sold it, he didn't make his money off the films.
Yeah.
He made his money off of a very strategic way that he put in place projectors for digital technology. And then the fact that he had a company that was controlling how the digital playback on sound existed. And he basically monopolized everyone by saying, oh, you want to see the new Star Wars? Well, that's great. Buy 2 of our projectors. Put that in. Oh, by the way, the only people that can actually make films that can play on those projectors is Industrial Light and Magic.
Yeah.
So, this is what, when people call Hollywood gangster, I mean, that's what that's about. Like, this is a person who created a franchise who everyone's dream version is they just lived off the franchise forever, not understanding that he's not getting the same merchandise rights on round 2 that he got on round 1. That was a fluke.
Yeah.
And they're not giving a 23-year-old all this, power and control. And now he's older, but I'm saying they're not giving you all the power and control, George Lucas. They don't trust your vision 100%.
That's
because it's a huge monetary investment for those that are, even if he's raising his own money, his own investment group doesn't want to always trust one. So if we as writers remember, it's a team sport, team effort. It starts with us. We're the first team. We're literally the strategy.
Yeah.
Like, that's all it is. We're writing a strategy game. This is what we think will happen in the order we see it happening. So many people can change it.
Yeah, and there's 2 great examples of a George Lucas story, which is one is George Lucas, the other one is James Cameron. And with George Lucas, what is so wonderful about his story is after the first film, he made so much money on merchandising after giving up his director money.
Yeah.
Right? That he was able to finance those films. They're all independent films except for Star Wars.
Right,
so,
right.
Including the Clone Wars and all this. That's all. And then he created lights and, whatchamacallit, the Skywalker Ranch. And then he had the Industrial Lights and Magic. And then he created, and he revolutionized the way film was made. And then you have James Cameron. James Cameron was believed so much in this Titanic movie that he chose he's like, don't just take my director money. I'll just take back end money. And actually going back to Avatar, the 3 films coming out, he went into the studio and they were giving him so much pushback on the movies. And he goes, I just like to point out that Titanic built this building. And he's like, Titanic pays you guys, Titanic, right? And they were like, you will not hear another word from us. And they let him go and film 3 Avatar films in a row. And
Sure.
But it's just one of those, like you're saying, it's a fluke. Like, who's doing that nowadays? Where do we find a Cameron, a James Cameron or a George Lucas situation where the people go, I'm gonna just not take my pay, but I want the back end. And they're like, yeah, you take the back end. Like, this film's ever gonna make money. And then
Sure. And the reality is, even that, there are slick ways around that, so here's the thing. You want to actually make a splash in this world, you'll be shocked if you really look at everything everyone's done prior to the thing you thought they did where they were the breakout.
Yeah.
And I think everyone's kind of aware of that, but that is the truth. Like, you will be shocked if you sit with the actual resume of everyone involved and how they got there. Yeah. And they didn't just stumble into the top of the heap. They just didn't. It isn't how it works. It's not how they're doing it. It's not even what they're doing while they're doing it. There are plenty of people out there who've written a script, gotten it made, got whatever money they got whatever accolades they got, and then never made another film regardless of how it performed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because they didn't do all the follow-up work. They just stayed in one lane, and that lane got dried up for whatever reason, In 1987, you make a totally different movie than in 2022, and they might not be relatable. So you have to keep changing the hats, changing the game, changing the part that you're doing. It's a business. You're a business.
Mm-hmm.
The boss is more than just being the writer. You want to hire other writers to do the thing that you're doing so that you can then spread that down the food chain. But if you're building, I hate the word empire. If you're building your place in it, then weather all storms. Like, figure out what that means for each individual person. I do. I mean, that's one of the reasons I'm not, as I think it does slow down your career. And I think that people should know that, because it doesn't, You don't rocket to the top when you're doing that. You have
Yeah.
to be a more stable platform. But that's like one of the great things about it is that you do build a stable platform, and then when life hits you, you have more than one avenue to go back and touch on.
Yeah, you got choices. You have a career, as they're saying. You don't want to be the guy who wrote Pretty Woman. You want to,
Right.
you
Well,
want to.
well, I mean, maybe you want to be that guy, but the point is, yeah, you don't want to be the person that just doesn't continue to grow, because
Yeah,
that's not even being an artist. That would be the equivalent of saying, oh, well, we loved your art when you first started. Can you go back and just do that over and over? And then you become
or
Thomas Kane of painting. So you just are doing the same thing. So you definitely don't want to just copy yourself or clown yourself or replicate yourself. They want you to, the imperial those who think money is still to be had,
hmm
you know and so you're in charge of that. Like, you have to decide what gets your attention, what gets your time, what gets your energy, and you're building a career you want to build, but that may not equal money, and that's hard for people to swallow. Like, you can do whatever you want. You're right. Don't listen to structure, don't listen to format, do your own thing, go
Yeah,
crazy, be all the things, and then you probably take it to a distribution company, make a great thing, and they'll probably chop it up to make it fit in a format that works for them because they have a totally different agenda.
yeah,
Or they'll just refuse it. That you're an artist, you don't have to make money. Like, it's
yeah. Just be an artist, right?
an
And
artist.
so the lessons for today's episode is don't expect someone to knock on your door once you finish your script.
Truth.
Okay?
Truth. That does not happen. No one
Just because
comes.
you wrote it,
No
doesn't
one
mean
comes. They
they're
just
waiting. Are they done yet? Two, get involved with your industry as much as possible in any way you can. Three, have a voice in what you want to say and not just taking anything just to get paid. And the writing, there's a difference between what we believe the writing industry is versus what the writing fantasy is, and
Sure.
it's important to adapt, as the Marines say. What is it? Adapt, improvise, or die, right? So,
Yes.
but I want to say thank you so much for being on the show. And is there? I'm going to put your information in the information section,
Sure. Sure.
of the video and the audio of the show. But do you want to shout out how people could find you? What the best way to find you
Yeah,
is?
I mean, I'm on all the social medias minus TikTok because my life is not. I don't have that much time. I
Okay.
do love the social medias, but not right yet. TikTok. No, I'm online under Meggy Garol at Twitter. I'm also on Instagram as Twitter, Meggy Garol. Or no, sorry, Meggy was here on Instagram.
Mhm.
You can find me though if you're productively trying to find me for a job or work on LinkedIn under also Meggy Garol.
Okay.
And I'm open to people. I often, I had a history of bringing writers together and trying to get them to integrate and trying to get them to communicate because I thought that was smarter than what everyone was doing. We may open those up again in the future. With pandemic the way it is, it's really hard because there's nothing clear cut that says we're going to live or not live or survive or not survive, and people are just scared. So it's all of the things. And so, I hopefully in the future we'll have some sort of networking opportunity that we bring back into it as soon as I'm not actively trying to do my own business.
All right, and anyone for listening on the audio version, Meggy Garol is Meggygarol,
Correct.
and you could find her on all the social medias, and
True.
obviously the right mindset. If you just look in the little data section of the
Yep.
episode, you'll see her information. And obviously, I want to thank you for being here and tolerating me for an hour, and just getting
I
the thought.
totally appreciate you being asked, and thank you for taking my perspective. Remember, there is no one journey, though. We are all on this big web of path. And good luck to everyone, and thanks so much for everything you do.
All right, awesome. I'll see you next time.
Yeah,
Bye. Oh, remember to keep developing the right mindset. All right, there we go.
totally true. Totally true.